sisters across the African continent and in the diaspora, I greet you. I greet you from a place of concern. I greet you from a place of hope. I greet you from a place of Pan-African solidarity. But most importantly, I greet you from a place of truth. What if I told you that a sitting president won an election with 72% of the vote, while the entire internet was shut down? Over 2,000 opposition supporters were in jail, and his own son, the army commander, publicly threatened to kill his opponent on social media. You would think I am describing a dystopian novel, a work of fiction. But I am describing what happened this month in Uganda, January 16th, 2026, 3:00 a.m., Butambala district, 35 miles outside Kampala. In the darkness, machete-wielding protesters storm a police station where votes are being verified. The police open fire. 7 people fall dead. Authorities call it self-defense. But National Unity Platform MP Mwanga Kivumbi tells a different story. Security forces raided his home during an election watch party. 10 killed. The internet is already dead. Uganda has gone dark. By sunrise, the Electoral Commission, its members handpicked by President Yoweri Museveni, announces what everyone already knew: Museveni has won 72% of the vote. His 7th consecutive term, 40 years in power. He is 81 years old. Bobi Wine, the 43-year-old musician who represents Uganda's youth, receives just 25%. But Wine is not there to hear the results. He has vanished. Army helicopters landed in his compound the night before. Armed men in military uniform forced entry, attacked his wife. Barbara tried to unlock her phone, asked why she married a terrorist. Wine escaped into hiding. Today, as I record this, the entire Ugandan military hunts one man. General Muhoozi Kainerugaba, Museveni's son and heir apparent, boasts on social media that his forces have killed 22 NUP terrorists, and he is praying the 23rd is Kabobi. He calls Wine a baboon, a coward, a terrorist. If this were a movie, people would say it is unrealistic. But this is Uganda. This is Africa. This is January 2026. And Professor PLO Lumumba saw it coming from miles away. There is an Igbo proverb that Professor Lumumba references often. A man who does not know where the rain began to beat him cannot say where he dried his body. So I ask you, where did the rain start beating Uganda? Let me give you 5 answers. And as I give them, I want you to understand that all 5 are true, but only one matters. Answer 1. The rain started in 1894 when Britain declared Uganda a protectorate, carved artificial borders, elevated certain ethnic groups over others, and planted the seeds of division we still harvest today. Answer 2. The rain started in 1971 when Idi Amin seized power in a military coup. 8 years of terror, 3,000,000 Ugandans murdered, the economy destroyed. Uganda became a global symbol of African chaos. Answer 3. The reign started in 1980 when Milton Obote returned to power and his forces massacred over 1,000,000 people in the Luwero Triangle. The skulls still sit in memorial sites, silent witnesses to state-sponsored genocide. Answer 4. The reign started in 1986 when a 42-year-old guerrilla commander named Yoweri Museveni emerged from the bush, promising no African head of state should be in power for more than 10 years. The people celebrated. The West applauded. Here was Africa's new hope, the liberator, the visionary. But here is answer 5, and this is the one that matters. The rain truly started beating Uganda the moment we stopped believing we had the power to dry ourselves. Professor Lumumba teaches us something uncomfortable. He says, one can go down to slavery and say we were enslaved, but remember we are not the only peoples in history who have been enslaved. One can go down to colonization, but we were not the only people colonized. Then he shares a Chinese proverb: he who blames others will never get far. He who blames himself is halfway the journey, and he who blames nobody has arrived. Listen carefully to what he is saying. Yes, Britain colonized us. Yes, Amin terrorized us. Yes, Obote massacred us. Yes, the IMF exploited us. Yes, neocolonialism is real. But, and this is crucial, since we regained independence in 1962, we have had 62 years. Since Museveni took power promising change, we have had 40 years. Time is not the issue. The issue is what Lumumba identifies clearly. The men and women who have been entrusted with political power and office have become dead gods. They have abused and misused their offices for personal gain to the detriment of the people. Dead gods. Look across our continent. Cameroon's Paul Biya, 42 years in power. Equatorial Guinea's Teodoro Obiang, 45 years. The DRC, blessed with $24 trillion in mineral wealth, remains one of Earth's poorest nations. Nigeria produces millionaires with no industries, just politicians stealing without consequence. Uganda's January 2026 election is not an exception. It is the pattern. It is what happens when liberation heroes become the tyrants they once fought. When revolutionaries forget revolution's purpose. When people exchange one dictator for another and call it progress. And the most painful truth, we saw it coming. Every single step. We saw it in 2005 when Museveni removed term limits. We saw it in 2017 when he removed age limits. We saw it in 2021 when he shut down the internet and declared victory. And in 2026 we are watching the same script, just with more bodies, more arrests, more violence. The rain did not start beating us yesterday. We have been wet for decades. The question Lumumba forces us to ask is not where did we get wet, but when will we dry ourselves? Before I dissect what Museveni has become, let us be honest about what he was. Let me speak a truth that many will not want to hear. In 1986, Yoweri Museveni was a genuine hero. I say this not to excuse what he has done. I say it because denying historical truth makes us liars, and liars cannot lead liberation movements. In 1986, Uganda was drowning in blood. Idi Amin's reign of terror had murdered 3,000,000. Milton Obote's return brought the Luwero Triangle Massacre, another 1,000,000 dead. The economy was destroyed. Institutions collapsed. Neighbors killed neighbors. Uganda was synonymous with chaos, brutality, state-sponsored murder. Then Museveni and his National Resistance Army emerged from the bush. They ended the killing. They restored order. They began rebuilding. For the first time in 15 years, Ugandans could sleep without fearing a midnight knock from death squads. For older Ugandans, especially those who survived the 1970s and early 1980s, Museveni represents salvation. That is not propaganda. That is lived experience. When grandmothers in Kampala markets say they support Museveni, they are not stupid. They are not brainwashed. They remember when their sons were dragged from homes and never returned. They remember when bodies floated down the Nile. Museveni stopped that. This is important to acknowledge, because the tragedy of Uganda is not that Museveni was always a monster. The tragedy is that he became the very thing he once fought against. As Lumumba teaches us, respect does not emanate from the office you hold. It is a product of your conduct over time. Museveni earned respect in 1986, but respect earned 40 years ago does not grant unlimited power today. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Bringing peace in 1986 does not justify dictatorship in 2026. Ending one tyranny does not grant you permission to create another. Stability without accountability is not freedom. It is silence enforced by fear. The hero of 1986 died somewhere along the way, and in his place stands something else entirely. Let me show you what he has become by identifying 3 tactics Lumumba warns us about. Three methods tyrants use to maintain power. And as I describe them, watch how perfectly they fit Uganda. Lumumba says the people are manipulated through ethnicity. Leaders weaponize people from their ethnic group and tell them it is in our best interest to produce a president. The presidency becomes the prize, and everybody in those communities can kill to have one of their own. Museveni, an Ankole from western Uganda, has carefully cultivated ethnic loyalty. His inner circle, his military command, his economic gatekeepers overwhelmingly from his region, his clan, his family. But it goes deeper. Look at his son, General Muhoozi Kainerugaba, appointed head of land forces at 37, now chief of defense forces, groomed as successor. The presidency is not just ethnic, it is becoming hereditary. A family business passed from father to son like a farm or a shop. When Museveni faced resistance within his own party about dynastic succession, what did he do? He chose to run again himself at 81. Because in his mind, Uganda is not a nation of 46 million citizens. It is his property. In a country under family rule, Bobi Wine observed the ruling family is always above the law. Lumumba is blunt. One of the shortest avenues to ill-gotten wealth in Africa is through politics. You get there and you grab without consequence. Uganda produces millionaires who own no factories, run no businesses, create no value. They simply occupy political office and become wealthy. Parliament members drive Land Cruisers, ministers own hotels, presidential advisors acquire land. Where does the money come from? State coffers, aid budgets, licenses sold to the highest bidder. The 2026 election cycle saw the NRM deploy unlimited resources, free food at rallies, cash handouts, fuel for mobilizers, state vehicles for campaigns. Meanwhile, Bobi Wine and the NUP had to campaign under constant attack. Over 2,000 supporters arrested. Rallies disrupted with tear gas beatings, live ammunition. Wine himself campaigned wearing a bulletproof vest and helmet. Think about that image. A presidential candidate needs body armor to talk to his own people. Why? Because politics in Uganda is an industry that cannot tolerate competition. The ruling elite has monetized power so thoroughly that allowing opposition to succeed means losing access to state resources they have come to see as personal property. This is perhaps the most insidious. Lumumba describes it perfectly. People who, to attract sympathy and gain office, will always refer to their suffering. I was detained. I did this. I was in the bush. And in that way they have a sense of entitlement. Museveni's entire legitimacy rests on his guerrilla credentials. Every speech references the Bush War. Every criticism is met with, I fought for this country, I liberated you, I brought stability, what have you done? At a 2025 rally he mocked young Ugandans. You Gen Z, what have you done so far? When I was 26 we started the Fronasa movement to liberate this country. But for you Gen Z, all I hear is vibe. The martyr complex on full display. I suffered in 1980, therefore I deserve unlimited power in 2026. You have not suffered enough, therefore you do not deserve a voice. But here is what Museveni refuses to acknowledge, that suffering was 40 years ago. An entire generation has been born, grown up, gone to university and started families knowing only one president. 70% of Uganda's 46 million people are under 30. They did not experience Idi Amin. They were not alive for the Bush War. What they experience is 43% youth unemployment, corruption, nepotism, state violence, biometric voting machines that mysteriously failed in opposition strongholds, an internet blackout on election day, ballot boxes stuffed while the nation was dark and could not share videos of fraud. When Bobi Wine, a 43-year-old representing this lost generation, dared to challenge the system, Museveni's response revealed everything. Not policy debates, not competing visions for Uganda's future. Just mockery, violence, and the full weight of the state deployed to crush him. This is what Lumumba means when he talks about leaders who have become dead gods. Not because they started as monsters, revolutionaries rarely do, but because power corrupts. And 40 years of absolute power corrupts absolutely. The revolutionary who promised no leader should serve more than 10 years is now in year 40, preparing to hand power to his son. The guerrilla who fought dictatorship has become the dictator. The liberator has become the oppressor. And the tragedy is he cannot see it. Or worse, he does not care. Here is where Lumumba's analysis becomes uncomfortable, because he does not let the people off the hook. The level of democracy is dependent on the political maturity of the masses. When the masses are politically immature, they are susceptible to manipulation. That sentence will anger many. But before you dismiss it, let me tell you 3 stories from Uganda's January 2026 election. 3 real moments that explain why people stay silent when tyrants rule. At Museveni's victory rally in Kampala, a journalist approaches a woman dancing with the NRM crowd. "Why do you support Museveni?" he asks. She smiles. "He has brought us peace and stability." The journalist presses, "But what about the internet shutdown, the arrests, the violence?" She looks away. "The music is loud. The free food is being distributed." She does not answer. Moments later, a presenter shouts into the microphone, "Be more animated if you want to receive the food." The crowd cheers louder. A plate of posho, a piece of chicken. That is the price of democracy in Uganda in 2026. Lumumba says it clearly. When the people are docile, then those who call themselves leaders abuse them to their own detriment. But why are people docile? Let me give you 3 reasons. On the 28th of November 2025 in Iganga district, a 32-year-old man named Mesach Okello attended an NUP rally. He was not a candidate, not a leader, just a supporter, a citizen exercising his democratic right. Police opened fire. Mesach fell, dead. His crime. Throwing stones, they claimed. No trial, no investigation. Just a body returned to his family with a bullet in his chest. On December, 8 soldiers beat Bobi Wine and his supporters with batons in Gulu. Amnesty International documented security forces pepper spraying people in the mouth, tasering them, beating them until batons broke, then asking for new batons to continue. Human Rights Watch reported journalists kicked and slapped for trying to cover events. Sarah Bairite, a prominent human rights activist, arrested on December 30. On January 12, 3 days before the election, the government ordered at least 10 NGOs to cease operations on vague and unsubstantiated grounds. This is how you create a docile population. You make the cost of resistance so high that people calculate. Is my vote worth my life? Is speaking out worth my family's safety? When the answer becomes no, tyranny wins. But fear is not the only weapon. Lumumba identifies another ethnic manipulation. In western Uganda, in Museveni's Ankole heartland, people genuinely believe he is their protector. They have been told, if we do not hold power, they will take it from us. They, the others, the enemy tribe. This is the genius of ethnic politics. You convince one group that their survival depends on your power. Then they defend you not because you serve them well, but because they fear what comes if you fall. At NRM rallies in Barara, speakers do not talk about policy. They talk about our son. They talk about how we liberated Uganda. They talk about what they will do if given power. Lumumba calls this weaponizing ethnicity. And once a population is divided along tribal lines, they stop asking, is this leader serving the nation? They only ask, is this leader from my tribe Uganda, like much of Africa, is raised to revere elders. From childhood you are taught, do not question, do not challenge, respect your elders. This is beautiful when elders are worthy of respect. But Lumumba challenges even this sacred cow. The elders that you revered were elders worthy of reverence. They took care of your affairs. They were fair judges. If they did wrong, people revolted against them. He continues with fire. Many of the men and women that we now call elders do not deserve respect. Respect is reciprocal. Respect does not emanate from the office you hold. It is a product of your conduct over time. We have made mistakes as Africans by according respect to individuals who do not deserve respect. People who abuse us. People who have arrogated to themselves the monopoly of knowledge and wisdom. Then he delivers the blow. It is now time that we stop persisting in our foolishness. Stop persisting in our foolishness. An 81-year-old man who has ruled for 40 years is not an elder deserving automatic respect. He is a politician who must be judged by his conduct. And if that conduct includes shutting down the internet, jailing opponents, and threatening to kill citizens, then respect is not owed. Resistance is. But here is the truth Lumumba forces us to confront. In countries where democracy thrives, Denmark, Finland, Singapore, even smaller African nations like Botswana, Mauritius, it is because the people made demands of their leadership. It is the duty of the people to rise up, Lumumba states plainly. When people rise up, then these demigods will disappear. Uganda's silence in the face of fraud is not just fear. It is also a choice. A choice to accept free food instead of demanding accountability. A choice to prioritize ethnic loyalty over national interest. A choice to believe that at least there is no war is a sufficient standard for leadership. But there is hope, because across Africa a generation has conquered fear. Let me tell you about a woman named Barbara Itungo, the 15th of January 2026. Night. Her husband has just escaped military capture. She is alone in their home in Magere, on the outskirts of Kampala. She hears helicopters, then vehicles, then footsteps. Armed men in military uniform break down the door. They demand to know where Bobi Wine is hiding. She says she does not know. They do not believe her. They grab her phone. They demand she unlock it. She refuses. They push her against a wall. They shout. They threaten. They ask her why she married a terrorist. They call her a fool. They say she will pay for her husband's crimes. Barbara Itungo is a mother, a wife, a citizen. But in that moment, standing in her own home, facing armed soldiers, she makes a choice. She refuses to unlock her phone. She refuses to betray her husband. She refuses to be afraid. Later, when she tells this story to the world via social media, her voice does not shake. Her message is clear. In a country under family rule, the ruling family is always above the law. But we will not be silent. We will not surrender. This is the spirit Lumumba speaks about when he says, "I talk to enough young Africans to have hope." These young men and women speak with confidence. They believe the continent is going to rise like the phoenix out of the fire of desperation. Uganda's youth voted overwhelmingly for Bobi Wine. In Kampala, in Gulu, in Jinja, anywhere, young people could vote freely. They chose change. Wine's rallies were massive, energetic, hopeful. Thousands of young Ugandans chanting, believing. They were not naive. They knew the system was rigged. They knew Museveni controlled the Electoral Commission, the military, the police, the courts. They knew the internet would be shut down. They knew their ballots might not count. But they showed up anyway. And when the fraud became undeniable, they did not accept it quietly. Let me show you 5 signs that Uganda's youth have awakened. After the results were announced, thousands took to the streets of Kampala. Despite military checkpoints, despite armed police, despite the internet blackout making coordination nearly impossible, they protested. They risked death to be heard. Before the internet died, videos flooded social media. Videos of ballot stuffing. Videos of biometric machines failing in opposition areas. Videos of soldiers beating civilians. Videos of police shooting unarmed protesters. The regime shut down the internet to stop the documentation. But it was too late. The world had already seen. Over 2,000 NUP supporters arrested. 22 killed according to General Muhoozi's own admission, but for everyone arrested 10 more joined. The more brutal the crackdown, the stronger the resistance. When the internet was shut down, young Ugandans switched to VPNs, mesh networks, satellite connections. They found ways to communicate, they organized, they adapted faster than the regime could suppress. This is what Lumumba references when he talks about the Sahel region, Mali, Chad, Guinea, where the people are beginning to conquer fear. The younger population is beginning to conquer fear. The army is beginning to ride the horse of liberation because the people have recognized that the ballot can always be manipulated. I am not advocating military coups, but Lumumba's point is deeper. When electoral systems are so compromised that good people cannot win through voting, populations will find other avenues. Uganda's youth have learned a harsh lesson in January 2026. They learned that playing by the rules does not work when the referee is owned by one team. They learned that peaceful democracy is a beautiful idea until the dictator shuts down the internet and stuffs the ballots. What will they do with this knowledge? That is the question that should terrify Museveni. Even Bobi Wine's defiance from hiding is instructive. In video messages recorded while walking through his ancestral graveyard, surrounded by his ancestors' graves, the entire Ugandan military hunting him, he says. The whole army is looking for one person. It is now coming to 10 days, but they have failed to find me. That means they are not as strong as they tell you. He is teaching something crucial. The emperor has no clothes. These systems of oppression that seem invincible, they are actually fragile. They depend on our fear, our compliance, our belief in their strength. The moment we stop believing, they collapse. Lumumba frames this as an intergenerational battle. Some of the things we are seeking may not be realized in our lifetime, but our joy lies in recognizing that we play our part. This is a long chain, and each one of us strengthens the chain. Uganda's youth may not have won this election. Museveni may serve another 5 years. He may even pass power to his son Muhoozi. But something irreversible has happened. A generation has been awakened. They have seen the fraud up close. They have experienced the violence. They have lost friends to police bullets. They have watched their votes stolen in real time. And they are not going back to sleep, Lumumba always says. This battle is an intergenerational battle. Sometimes it takes millennia for change to be discovered. The seeds planted in Uganda in January 2026 will bear fruit. Maybe not next year. Maybe not in 5 years. But they will bear fruit. Because, as Lumumba teaches, this journey is timeless. Let me bring us from analysis to action. Because Lumumba is clear about one thing above all: leadership philosophized is not leadership. Leadership moralized is not leadership. Leadership intellectualized is not leadership. Leadership that is acted, leadership that is defined by service, that is leadership. For too long, we Africans have been excellent at diagnosing our problems. We write papers, we hold conferences, we create think tanks. We philosophize about Pan-Africanism. We moralize about corruption. We intellectualize about neocolonialism. But talk without action is just noise. Uganda's crisis teaches us 5 specific actions, not theories, not wishes, actions. Uganda's Electoral Commission Chairman Simon Bayabakama admitted receiving warnings from senior government figures not to declare certain candidates as winners. The referee of the election confessed to being threatened by one team. When institutions are this compromised, the ballot alone cannot save you. This is the reality facing Kenya, Nigeria, Cameroon, Zimbabwe, and so many African nations where electoral bodies serve incumbents rather than citizens. The action: demand independent electoral commissions, foreign observers, technology-backed transparency, parallel vote tabulations by citizens, make electoral fraud expensive, visible, undeniable. Uganda shut down the internet 2 days before the election, claiming concerns about misinformation and incitement. The real reason: to prevent Ugandans from sharing videos of ballot stuffing, from coordinating poll watching, from documenting fraud. By the time the internet returned, Museveni had already been declared winner. The action: invest in mesh networks, satellite internet, VPN infrastructure, ham radio systems. Build communication channels that governments cannot shut down. Technology must serve liberation, not oppression. Where was the strong international response to Uganda's fraud? The African Union observers saw no evidence of ballot stuffing, but acknowledged intimidation and abductions. The United States barely raised its voice. The EU expressed concern but took no action. Uganda receives billions in Western aid, yet when its people needed international pressure, that leverage was not used. The action: stop waiting for Western validation. Build solidarity with other oppressed nations. BRICS, African Union regional alliances, South-South trade, Southern cooperation. Liberation comes from the oppressed, not from former oppressors. Lumumba says, "Ask not why the world is not clean, sweep your front yard. Ask your neighbor to sweep theirs. And lo and behold, the world will be clean." Stop waiting for a perfect leader to emerge. Be a leader in your space. The action: if you are a teacher, educate with integrity. If you are a doctor, serve with excellence. If you are a business person, create jobs honestly. If you are a student, pursue knowledge relentlessly. If you are a journalist, tell truth fearlessly. The change starts with individual Ugandans, Kenyans, Nigerians choosing excellence daily. It is the duty of the people to rise up. When people rise up, these demigods will disappear. The action: join civil society groups, support independent media, attend town halls, document abuse, use social media strategically, form coalitions across ethnic lines, create alternative institutions when official ones are captured. The NUP in Uganda did this. Despite the crackdown, they organized. They trained poll watchers. They created networks. They showed that organization is possible even under dictatorship. Yes, 22 of them were killed. Yes, over 2,000 were arrested. But they planted seeds that will grow. Because here is what Lumumba knows and what every dictator fears: systems built on lies eventually collapse under their own weight. Governments that rule through fear eventually exhaust their people's capacity for fear. Legitimacy cannot be faked forever. Let me close with the words Lumumba lives by, words from Fidel Castro that every African must hear. When you are fighting against oppression and against bad things, keep on banging on the door. Never say die. Because when you are about to say die, that is when the door is about to give in. Never say die. Uganda's January 2026 election is not the end of the story. It is a chapter, a painful, blood-stained, disillusioning chapter, but not the end. Because here is what Lumumba knows and what every dictator fears. Systems built on lies eventually collapse under their own weight. Governments that rule through fear eventually exhaust their people's capacity for fear. Legitimacy cannot be faked forever. Museveni can manipulate ballots, but he cannot manufacture genuine support. He can shut down the internet, but he cannot shut down human consciousness. He can hunt Bobi Wine, but he cannot hunt the idea. Wine represents that another Uganda is possible. And that idea, once planted in the minds of 32 million young Ugandans, cannot be uprooted. I speak now directly to Uganda. Your votes were stolen. Your internet was killed. Your leaders are hunted. Your people are jailed. Your democracy is a theater. I know. But you are not alone. We in Africa have lived through this. Kenya lived through this. Nigeria lives through this. Zimbabwe lives through this. The Congo has lived through this for 60 years. We know your pain. We know your rage. We know what it feels like when the world watches you bleed and does nothing. But we also know this: you will survive. Not because the world will save you, but because you will save yourselves. Patrice Lumumba was murdered, but his vision lives in every African who fights for sovereignty. Kwame Nkrumah was overthrown, but his dream lives in every Pan-Africanist. Thomas Sankara was assassinated, but African youth still sing his songs of dignity. The person can be killed, the dream cannot. Uganda will survive this storm. Your oil will one day belong to you. Your land will be yours. Your future will be yours. But remember this lesson written in blood across 60 years of African independence. Sovereignty is not given, it is taken. And once taken, it must be defended at any cost. To everyone watching in America, Europe, Africa, Asia, do not believe the propaganda. When they say election, ask where are the ballots counted in darkness. When they say democracy, ask why is the internet shut down. When they say stability, ask at what cost. Silence enforced by fear is not peace. Study history. Learn about Congo, Libya, Iraq, Chile. Recognize the pattern so you see it when it repeats. Support independent media. Outlets that tell truths mainstream media buries. Build solidarity. Uganda's suffering is connected to Palestine's suffering, to Congo's suffering, to Yemen's suffering. Our struggles are one. But most importantly, understand this: we do not beg for justice. We demand it. We do not ask for respect. We command it. We are not your subordinates. We are nations. We are peoples. We are sovereign. Let me end with the question that defines our time. Which side of history will you stand on? I have chosen. I stand with Uganda. I stand with Bobi Wine and the 32 million who voted for change. I stand with Barbara Itungo, who refused to unlock her phone. I stand with Mesa Hokelo, whose only crime was attending a rally. I stand with the 2000 jailed for believing democracy was real. I stand with the 22 killed for daring to resist. I stand with truth against power. I stand with dignity against domination. I stand with the young against the tyranny of the old. Which side do you stand on? The door is starting to crack. Keep banging.